and welcome to the Alexander Ovechkin episode. Oh, wait, grade 8, the 8th episode of DFO Rundown Insider Edition. Alongside my good man, David Pagnotta, I'm Irfaan and Gaffar. Lots to talk about today as we are a presentation of Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Couple of veteran executives talking about their struggling teams in the current state, and Barry Trotz and Jim Rutherford. We'll get to that a little bit later on. And we'll be joined by President and GM of the Columbus Blue Jackets, Don Waddell. We'll be talking about the Blue Jackets and other workings around the National Hockey League. David, sup? How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited for the show. Excited for a big day in hockey. And we're at that 25. We're at that quarter mark now officially with U.S. Thanksgiving kicking in. So let's see. Maybe Donnie will break us down on some moves he's going to make or something like that. That'd be nice.
Well, we in the media, and I think that, people watching always look at U.S. Thanksgiving and say, all right, this is where you separate the pretenders, the contenders, the what are you doings, and the we need to change teams in the NHL. There are a lot of those currently right now if we go down the list and look at it. But let's focus on the Columbus Blue Jackets right now because obviously, Don Waddell is going to join us here in a little bit. Current state of the Columbus Blue Jackets, where would you put them at in kind of that area, as I mentioned, not really a contender, but kind of on a team that may be teetering that they want to be a playoff team?
Yeah, they're going to be, the way that they're looking, and they're battling injuries, and we'll get some updates, I think, on that. But, they're going to be flirting with the wild card positioning. And, this year's weird. There's so many teams that are in it. So many teams that are still in it. And typically around this time of year, you look at where the playoff or where the standings are, and about 75 to 77% of the teams that have a playoff position are in. But you got teams that are tied in points that are not in because of a variety of reasons. So this is going to be a very interesting season to see how this kind of plays out. And I'm anticipating the Jackets with what they've got, the young players that are starting to come into their own and really take next steps. Those are the guys that are going to be pushing and propelling this team forward, like Adam Fantilli and so on, to get this club going. So I expect them to continue to be in that pack all season long.
1 point separates the second wild card team in the East, and the Pittsburgh, Montreal, Philadelphia, Florida, and all tied with 25 points. And obviously you have Boston with 26. Parity in the National Hockey League. I mean, if you're Gary Bettman, you must love it right now, though, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. He was on CNBC yesterday talking about how the valuations of clubs being higher. CNBC valued teams on average $2.2 billion. The NHL's internal evaluations are higher. Obviously, I would suspect they would be. But he also talked about expansion. And if when the league goes to expansion, the number is going to start with a 2. So you're talking about $2 billion plus to enter the league. For whether it's Atlanta or Houston or whomever. So the league is in a very, very good, ridiculously good state right now. It never been better, and it just continues on that incline.
What do you attribute that to? We've seen the success of the Florida Panthers the last few seasons. Obviously, the runs the Edmonton Oilers have been on the last few seasons as well. But what do you attribute the evaluations of teams just skyrocketing over the last little while?
Just look, a combination of more interest. The television rights have played a huge factor in this. Obviously, Canada's holding a lot of weight there with their record-breaking deals with national broadcast deals. But, the U.S. isn't far behind. Their next deal is going to be significant with respect to their broadcast rights and what they're going to bring to the table. It's more exciting. One of the things that Gary Bettman attributed a lot of the success to was that parity, was how many teams are still in it. It just gets the interest flowing even more. You're talking about ticket sales and merch sales and all that fun stuff that comes with it. And they've been aligning themselves with the right partners as well. So, for these teams, and even like some of these clubs are valued higher than some of their competitors in MLB and NBA in certain circumstances. So great sign for it. But yeah, look, Edmonton has shot up. No question, their back-to-back runs have played a factor. But across the board, the interest levels are peaking and are on the up. And that's a big reason, all of that, along with additional sponsorship, league revenues, growing the game more, putting more emphasis on the players. All of this has led to more interest, and all of this has led to more value for the league across the board.
values going up, player salaries going up, cap going up. Everything seems to be going up and going well for the National Hockey League right now. Obviously, outdoor games, Winter Classics, Heritage Classic at some points. There's a lot of good, a lot of good juju around the National Hockey League right now, as I like to say. A couple of teams where that exact same thing, the juju, isn't so good, are the Nashville Predators and the Vancouver Canucks. I kind of want to start with the Nashville Predators a little bit later on once we get to this and, hear what Barry Trotz had to say, but obviously hear what Jim Rutherford had to say as well about his team. But we'll definitely get to those in a little bit, as we do have Don Waddell that is going to join us here momentarily. Pleased now to be joined by President of Hockey Operations, General Manager for the Columbus Blue Jackets, Don Waddell. Don, thank you for taking the time. We really do appreciate this.
No, pleasure to be with you guys.
Let me lead you with this one. You've been with the Columbus Blue Jackets organization for about a year and a half now. What, if anything, about the team have you come to learn that you didn't know going into this job?
Well, I probably didn't know the guys individually like I do now, and we have great leadership on this team, and you need good veterans to lead your young guys. We got a lot of young guys that are trying to find their way still. So, if you have good vets that do it the right thing on and off the ice, it's going to certainly help your young players as you continue to move forward.
And as you build your team, and whether it's in season, whether it's the off season, we're seeing a salary cap that's continuously increasing. The projections are looking good. Everything is on the upswing. How does that affect you as a manager with respect to how you're building this team for this season and moving forward, knowing that you can project things out accordingly based on what the league is projecting?
Yeah, I think we've seen it last summer that, free agency is never going to be like it used to be. There's more money in the system now, and teams are able to lock up their players. If you go back even not last summer, the summer before, there was 4 or 5 teams that had to dump a bunch of contracts to get within the cap. And this year, really, Colorado made a couple moves. We were involved in it right before the draft there to pick up Charlie Coyle, Miles Wood. But everybody else was pretty good shape from a cap. So I think going forward, you're going to see less and less free agents hit the market because teams can lock them up. So saying that, we got a bunch of young guys ourselves and some veteran players that we know we want to continue moving forward with. And, the cap's going to continue to rise. We know that, and we got to continue to build here and build our revenues up so we can keep up with the cap and be able to keep our players that we need to keep long term.
John, I was just taking a look at the standings, obviously with U.S. Thanksgiving, quickly approaching here, and so much parity in the National Hockey League. Obviously, it's a good thing, but when you look at how to manage your team and what you need to do to want to improve your team every day, like you say, do things change with how much parity there is or with how tight the race may be and where we are right now?
100%. Right now, anytime you talk to teams, and I've talked to a lot of teams here in the last period, the last even 5-6 days, and everybody's looking for players. Nobody's giving away players, and teams, until we get to some separation in either conference, right now, you'll see some trades later on. It'll be draft picks and prospects like we always see, but right now most teams are looking for players for their roster. Not only the amount of injuries that have gone around the league, but teams trying to get better to stay in that race.
And you have, talking about that and talking about also some of the young players in the league, you've got a couple of guys that are on expiring deals in different circumstances. You've got Boone Jenner, who's been battling a little bit of health issues right now, but looks to be good pretty soon. And of course, Adam Fantilli, who's really stepped up his game in the last little while here. He's going to be a restricted free agent. Boone is eligible to be a UFA. I know you can't give us all the details, but just is there any update on either of those two fronts with respect to a potential extension on either end?
Yeah, no, I've talked to both representations from both players, along with some other not only free agents but restricted guys, and pretty much we've all agreed. Let's wait till the Olympic break. There's no big rush, from any end. Boone is our captain. He's been here since day one. Certainly a player that we want to keep here, and I think he wants to stay here. Obviously, you got to meet the demands and come to a deal that makes sense for both teams. And Fantilli, Pat Brisant, I've dealt with Pat for many, many years. We had a good meeting in late August and said, let's table it. Let's see how things go here off the start, and we'll get together as the season progresses. So no live negotiations going on right now, but touch base with all the agents.
How much, you mentioned the Olympic break, how much has that changed the way that teams are going to operate? You know, the condensed schedule, you guys are playing a lot of games and a lot of nights, not much time for practice time. And then the Olympic break's going to come and there's going to be this big gap of time where, you know, your players that aren't going to the Olympics are going to have, you know, time off, whether it's vacations and things like that. But do you guys have an internal trade deadline other than the one that might happen after the Olympic break, or would you like to get business done, hopefully maybe before that?
No, I think anytime you're in a position we are where we feel like that, you know, we have an opportunity to make the playoffs, if there's a deal that comes along, and whether that's December 1st or January 1st or whenever, we want to take action and take a step forward. You know, don't want to necessarily wait till after the trade deadline, because, you know, we're going to have 3/4 of the games in our books already. And, you know, you can't afford to go through 4 or 5 games without picking up points, because it's so tight there. You know, last week we went on a little run or 10 days ago, where we won 3 games in a row. We moved up as 3rd place in the Metro, and then we pick up 3 points out of 8 and we fall right back down. So, you know, it's that close. So for our situation, if there's a move that we feel would make us better right now, we would certainly be able to pull the trigger.
If you could shed some light just on, you mentioned earlier about, you know, being on calls and having conversations with other managers throughout the league. I assume this is, if you can enlighten everyone, that's a daily occurrence. You're on the phone, you're talking, you're seeing what's out there. If you could just kind of peel the curtain back a little bit to give us a little bit of insight as to the day-to-day and how those conversations kind of take place as best you can. With respect to just staying in communication, staying up to date with everybody else throughout the league, to see, you know, who might be available, who may, you know, be interested in some of your guys, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think every call is a little different. You know, there's some GMs that'll call you directly with, you know, would you move player X? Would you move player Y? And, you know, not to give you, I don't have any players named X or Y on my team, so
Right.
it's safe to say that. And there's other guys that just say, you know, are you thinking about doing anything? You know, I need a left shot winger, I need a centerman or something like that. So it's a little different, but, you know, it hasn't heated up. Let's just say that. You know, there's been a lot of what I'd say investigation calls both ways, and you know, I'm the same way. You know, so you know, you got certain guys that you would move on and to try to make your team better, and there's other guys certainly that are going to be here for not only now but for our future.
Donnie, I got one for you. I've always wondered this, and kind of similar to what Dave asked you. You know, you've seen around the National Hockey League where, you know, in years past, you know, teams have sent out memos to other general managers and executives saying, we're open for business, or saying that player X or player Y, like you just mentioned, no, you don't have those guys, but they're available. I guess my question to you is, immediately when you see that, what's your first reaction, and what are you telling your team when you receive certain memos like this saying that a team kind of is open for business?
Yeah, you know, most of the time, you know, I don't like to share a lot of that. You know, we kind of got a little, our group, you know, you don't want it to get out in the public. I wouldn't want it to get out in the public, but, you know, if a certain team, you know, sends out a memo about players, you know, I'll look at our pro staff and say, okay, can you guys get some eyes on this team? You know, and just make sure we're familiar with it. You know, we have 5 or 6 guys out in the field going to games every night. So you might direct them toward a certain team at times, just to say, hey, keep some eyes on this team. You know, they might be up to doing something here in the future. And then on the individual guys, you know, the first thing I do, we have a great scouting system, great scouts. I'll go to our system right away, and actually when I'm on the phone, and see what our scouts say. If it's a red flag and they have no interest, and I can be, you know, cut out that next call and say, hey, we have no interest about this. And there's something we have interest in, then we'll explore it and get our guys involved.
On a league-wide level, you know, CNBC came out with their valuations the other day. Gary Bettman, the commissioner, was on CNBC yesterday talking about those valuations, talking about the league's health, and the incline in overall revenue. from your perspective, and you obviously handle the day-to-day and the rosters and the transactions and everything, but also the business side you're involved in with the organization. How nice is it to see, how good is it to see the prosperity of this league continuously on the up, and the potential of expansion? Gary Bettman indicating that if we even go that route, we're talking about $2 billion plus on that. Just your thoughts on the health of the league at the moment.
Well, I think it's tremendous. Obviously Gary's been doing this for a long time. He's got a great feel for ownership, and we've had some ownership issues over the last 10 years, and it looks like everything's resolved. You got pretty stable franchises everywhere, so that's a good thing for the league. And we continue to grow the revenues. It's a challenge for a team like us because we can't keep up with some of the other teams from a market standpoint, but we got to do what we can do in our market to try to continue to raise our revenues, because as the cap goes up, it's hard for us to keep up with the cap, to be honest with you, from a revenue standpoint. Now, saying that,
right,
and I'm very clear, once you start making the playoffs, that can change your whole situation, because, here, it's been a little bit of a drought and not that many playoffs over the 25 years. And if we can make the playoffs consistently, we can, first of all, stop talking about making the playoffs and start talking about how you're going to win a cup. But we all know that playoff hockey is what, and it's not so much the revenue. I always say it's not so much the revenue from playoffs, because there's a lot of expenses that go into playoffs, but it's gaining confidence in your fan base and turning, and I've witnessed it with other franchises, going from all of a sudden 10,000 season tickets to 13,000. That's where you can really grow your revenues. It's, the playoff success helps you gain more momentum in the marketplace, and that's certainly what we need to do here.
Don, final one from me, Bob, before we let you go here. How much different is Rick Nash, the hockey executive, than Rick Nash, the hockey player, was?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you can meet better people than Rick. He was a true pro, obviously, for a lot of years, and a great player. Rick's a quiet guy, but he's got great opinions when you ask him. And he's not far removed. I go back to the coaching search. When I was going through the coaching search, Rick was very close. He could call players that played for these guys. I can't call players. I can call their GMs. I can call a lot of people, but he can actually call players that he played with that played for all these coaches. And I say he was a tremendous help during that process. And he's doing a lot of development, keeping an eye on a lot of our prospects. I know he's going to games every weekend, someplace in this country, to watch our guys, and he's got a great feel for it. And the other thing, when Rick Nash picks up the phone and wants to call somebody, he can call anybody he wants, and they're going to take his call.
Donnie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Good luck the rest of the way, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me on your show, and look forward to the future for sure.
Huge shout out to Don Waddell, President General Manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets, taking the time to join us for this episode of DFO Rundown Insider. What surprised you the most in that conversation, if anything, Dave?
Well, from surprise, not really much. I think, if anything, tabling, some of the, especially the Adam Fantilli discussions. I thought that Boone Jenner, those talks would happen a little bit later, but also just saying, because there's been, a little bit of back and forth between the two, but I guess it's been primarily, hey, we're still on track to figure out some negotiation tactics and have those conversations in February during that break. And I think that's what a lot of teams are going to do, Irf. I think that 3-week gap in the NHL schedule is going to allow some teams to take care of that housekeeping that they want. And he's right. Like, the market has shifted. Teams have more money to spend. We're going to see less and less UFAs hit that market. And I think eventually that's going to translate into a more aggressive trade market, because that's really the only option some teams are going to have to go in. Like, he talked about adding Coyle and Wood last summer at the draft, because they were looking and projecting at what other options may be available to them. That made sense. I think a lot of teams are going to follow in that lead moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that, he mentioned looking at the standings, it kind of changes things a little bit, because there really isn't no separation right now, especially, when at the time we're doing this, obviously on the eve of U.S. Thanksgiving, and there's a lot of teams in very similar positions, and some teams we didn't expect to be there at all, and I think some teams didn't even expect to be there at all. But let's get to the two big hockey executives that talked about their team. I want to start in Nashville. What is going on with Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators?
This one's an interesting one because one day he's saying one thing to someone, another day he's saying something else to somebody else, and whatnot. I think the moral of this story is Nashville's going to be very, very active. It's just a matter of when. He admitted, we've reported this, he admitted yesterday in an interview that they've had discussions with teams. I think it was with ESPN, by the way. But they've had discussions with teams about Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. So he confirms that. And this is more of the exploratory, area, I think, which Donnie Waddell as well kind of mentioned, that some teams right now are just kind of seeing what their options are, and they'll get to it later, reconvene at a later date. I think that's what's happened with Stamkos and Marchessault. But now we know definitively those conversations have happened. Ryan O'Reilly, as we've talked about for weeks, is at the top of a lot of teams' wish lists. There are other players on this team that they're willing to listen on, plus their UFAs, Michael Bunting, Eric Howlett, and so on. This is going to be an aggressive team going through what I suspect will be a very aggressive retool. You've got Roman Josi, you've got Philip Forsberg. There's no question teams are saying, hey, what's the deal with those guys? But those are so much more significant of a move to make that if those even are considered, and both of those they've got no moves, that's probably summer. I think the focal point will be O'Reilly, the UFAs, and then Stammer and Marchessault to see what's going to happen there. Because I can tell you, and we've talked about this offline too, Stamkos and Marchessault, as much as they love living and being in Nashville with their families, are both open to the possibility of going to a legit contender, not just this season, but over the duration of their contracts. But it's going to take Nashville. They're going to have to eat money on these deals, especially on Stamkos. So there's a lot of variables that are in play here.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch the Nashville Predators operate here down the stretch. Where I am, It's always fascinating to watch what happens here with the Vancouver Canucks. Jim Rutherford, in writing to 31 other teams, we are open to trading veterans on this hockey team, not just their UFAs, veterans, other guys that are on current contracts, guys that have, expiring deals, guys that are, under contract with the Vancouver Canucks. Just from people that you've talked to around the league, what's the reaction to that? And I know from being here, obviously the fan base, and I don't think that they're wrong in the fact that they want to rebuild this thing, but you don't rebuild this thing unless you trade Quinn Hughes. And I think that is coming. I really do. I don't think it's coming yet. I think everyone on the Vancouver Canucks roster is on the market except for Quinn Hughes right now. But that's just right now. What do you think?
What I can tell you, we'll get to the other guys in a second. What I can tell you, I got a text message from somebody very close to Quinn Hughes' camp. And the message that's being relayed is, we control everything. So anything that's going to happen, with Quinn, it's going to be because Quinn wants it. And whether he stays, whether he is traded, especially if he's traded, it's going to be because that they're holding the cards. Put it this way. It's not necessarily Rutherford and Alvin and the Vancouver Canucks. It's Quinn Hughes. So I agree with you. I don't think anything's going to happen now, but this isn't a scenario where the GM and the president are going to go, okay, we feel we can't sign him. We're going to have to move him somewhere. We're going to handle this one. There's a lot of control with Quinn Hughes and his camp. And that's first and foremost on that front. And as you mentioned, this isn't something that's going to happen now. This is going to be something that they're going to address down the road if they do get to that point. But the retool is definitely going to be on in Vancouver. So Kiefer Sherwood, they still have not had any contract negotiations, like actual contract negotiations with Sherwood's camp. He's available. Connor Garland's name in the last week or so has been popped up. We talked about this as well. His no trade doesn't kick in until July 1. He's going to be a player that's going to be a talking point for the Canucks. There are other pending, like Teddy Bluger, sure, but he's hurt, so we're going to have to wait till he's healthy. Derek Forbort, same situation. He's hurt even more. We got to wait even longer to see what's going to happen there. And then where else do you go? Like, I talked to some agents that have some of these players that have no movement clauses, and they're going, all right, but my guy's got a no move, so I'm not expecting anything happening. The only interesting one there is to me, and you can talk more to this, is Tyler Myers. He's got one more year on his deal. The no move shifts to a 12-team no trade list. I think it's either no trade or full trade. Either way, he's got a modified no trade that kicks in July 1. If they press him enough, would that escalate? I wonder if that's part of their thought process there.
I think it is. I think that Myers is a guy that definitely, among the veterans that are quote unquote available, is the one that they're looking at. I'm not entirely sure I agree with you. Agent JP Barry, I think is not really come out, but I think between you and other people that I've spoken to has said that my guy's got a no move. Like he signed it. He likes it here. He's got a house in Kelowna. He loves being in Vancouver. And then you look at the other guys, just by term of their long contracts. Brock Besser is set up his roots here in Vancouver. I mean, that contract, I don't think is getting moved. I mean, unless you're the Minnesota Wild, and then something would have to be crazy. Jake DeBrusk, right. I'm not entirely sure how that one goes. Marcus Pettersson, probably not. Like Kevin Lankinen. Kevin Lankinen just signed. Thatcher Demko. The two goalies interest me a little bit. Thatcher Demko, obviously, is on the shelf right now, but you look at a team like the Edmonton Oilers, you lose 9-1 to the Colorado Avalanche and you get slapped in the face on home ice again against the Dallas Stars in a game where I know Connor McDavid says it's on all of us, but at some point the goalie's got to stop the puck. So
it'd be nice.
And I think there is going to be a little bit of a goalie market here. And I'm wondering if one, if not both of the Vancouver Canucks goalies are going to be available.
Well, yeah, and let me ask you about that. Like you sign Lankin into an extension and you give him a no move. If he's your guy moving forward, like the plan couldn't have been, we're going to platoon these guys and spend $9 million on our goalies and be set. Right? Like I'm confused by the thought process and the direction in between the pipes. When you give Lankin in that contract, that signals to me he's your guy moving forward. And then they sign Demko to an extension and elevate the no move into this season. And now I don't know what the hell the plan is in net. I know you want to manage, Thatcher for a bit, but help me out here.
I think if I had the question, there would be, or if I had the answer to that, things would be a lot different. But look, I think that they understand the health question marks with Thatcher Demko. I think that was a big thing as well. You sign him to that contract. You knew the risk. That is why you signed Kevin Lankin. And I don't think that they thought that Demko would be on the shelf 25 games into the season. I don't think that was part of their plan. I think that there was some sort of load management that they did want with Thatcher Demko to reach a certain amount of games. And obviously, clearly he's not going to get there with him being hurt. Now Kevin Lankinen is not with the team, didn't start with the team on this current road trip for personal reasons. So we obviously hope everything's okay there. But even then, Dave, like you look at Kevin Lankinen in his work as a starter here in Vancouver. I know the team in front of him hasn't helped him that much, but it hasn't been that great. If I'm being completely honest, it really hasn't. I think Jeff Patterson and I do Rink Wide after, every single Canuck game. And I think the letter grade that Jeff gave Lankinen was a C for his role as a starter here for the Vancouver Canucks. And I couldn't agree more. He hasn't stolen them a game. He hasn't been the Kevin Lankinen of what the Vancouver Canucks wanted when they signed him to that extension, when obviously contract season, Kevin Lankinen was going nuts. And Thatcher Demko has been a problem as well. So you look at where their positions of strength were going to be looking into this season, and it might be one of their biggest weaknesses right now is in net.
Everybody thought goaltending and D was going to be sound for Vancouver.
Yeah, and they can't stop the puck.
We can't
stop pulling the puck out of their net. Exactly. And that's just not on the goaltenders. That's on everybody.
100%. And that's why the argument in Edmonton, it's so polarized on the goalies. And yeah, you're right. They got to stop pucks every once in a while. And it hasn't been pretty. But that game against Dallas where they got smoked 8-3, there were it wasn't like the goalie it was all on him. They're letting up fluttery little goals here and there. There was no additional support. the amount of guys wide open near the net for the Dallas Stars was remarkable. Everyone's just watching the puck. Nobody's playing D. So when everyone cries and says, well, we got to get a new goalie in Edmonton, on the grand scheme of it, probably.
Yeah.
But there are so many other deficiencies within this group that it's not exclusive. And that's why Stan Bowman's saying, look, it's not just the goalies. It's other elements of this team. And they're banged up. Now, they're supposed to get Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Kasperi Kapanen back in the lineup this weekend, I believe. So that'll spread things out a little bit more up front, which will be nice. But you still have to help contribute at both ends. And you also, this reemphasizes, especially during the regular season, you can't only count on Connor and Leon to get the job done. So if team defense is a problem, you can't lay it all on the goalies. Same with Vancouver, same with Toronto. Like that game, I was in Montreal on Saturday where they pulled Joseph Wall after 4 goals. He was their best player. It was the rest of the team that was garbage. So you have to look at other elements. Then with Vancouver, clearly goaltending and defense and Team D has been a big struggle for them this season. So now you're talking about moving some guys out, bringing in younger players, filling up your cupboard a little bit with draft picks, and then trying to retool on the fly to keep your captain happy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
100%. I mean, let me say these last 2 things before we get to our Bet365 segment. Your best ability is your availability, and the Canucks don't have that in goaltending. And the other one is good goaltenders can steal you games. And great goaltenders can get you a lot more than that. And there's aren't many teams in the National Hockey League that have great goaltending. But anyways, I digress. There's a lot of stuff that's going on.
Team game.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is a team game. All right, let's get to our picks. By our, I mean my picks for this weekend here, presented by Bet365. Let's go to Saturday. Vegas over the Habs, Sharks over the Vancouver Canucks, and the Blackhawks over the Nashville Predators. You put those 3 together, you're going to get some pretty good odds. As whatever you bet, it's never the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game. Use code NATION. Bet365 must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. David, thank you very much for doing this. Jacob, thank you very much for pressing the buttons for this episode. And Don Waddell, President, General Manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets, we thank you as well, as this was episode 8 of DFO Rundown Insider Edition.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.